It is time for part 2 of our sock monkey. So what you are going to need for today's part is going to be your sewn part 1 of your monkey. You're going to need the hair tie. You're going to need a needle and thread, a chopstick or a pencil or even a pen, some pins, a pair of scissors, and your stuffing. So what you're going to want to do is turn your sock right side out. Again, be careful when you are working at the cut area because we don't want the threads to come apart. So we turn our top part right side out. We turn our feet out. If you want to use the chopstick to kind of push those ends out, you can do that. And then you are going to start stuffing all portions of the sock, the leg parts and all of the body part. So when you're doing your stuffing, you want to kind of break up that stuffing so it's not just a big wad. And then you're just going to be putting it into the sock. So my sock monkey is all stuffed. Obviously, since you're using a sock, the sock is pretty stretchy, so you'll have to move the stuffing around a little bit and play around with it. Even after you sew it, you can kind of play around with it and get the shaping correct for what you would like it to look like. What we do need to do now, obviously, is to close up this leg part. So if you want to use pins, you certainly can use pins. Again, just like I did with my legs, I'm just going to kind of match up my stripes and stitch and kind of move the pieces together as I'm going. We are going to be using a ladder stitch. So what we'll be doing is folding those raw edges, those cut edges inside, and then we're going to be working on stitching along the folds of that fabric. So we're going to utilize a single thickness of thread. Okay, so unlike when we stitched our legs together, where we had the 2 layers together, I'm just going to have a single thickness. So I'm just going to tie a knot on one end of my thread, and then I'm going to thread it on my needle. So as you're stitching, you want to make sure that you are holding right around the eye of the needle when you're pulling your needle through so that you don't pull the needle off the thread. If you pull it off the thread, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to hurt anything, but it'll get pretty annoying and frustrating for you if you keep pulling the needle off the thread. All right, so as I said, I'm going to have my 2 layers of fabric folded so that the raw edges are on the inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my needle and I'm going to kind of go a little bit past where the hole starts. And then I'm going to have my needle go towards where the hole starts. I can go right in there. That way my knot will be hidden, because it'll be on the inside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work back and forth and kind of do sort of a zigzag back and forth along that seam line. So my thread is coming out of my fabric on this side. So what I'm going to do is go across, and I'm just going to take my needle and I'm just going to go along the fold of that fabric, and then I'm going to pull it through. And then I'm going to go from this side and I'm going to go across and along the fold. This ladder stitch is a really great stitch to become comfortable with and be familiar with, because it really creates pretty much an invisible seam. So whatever you're stitching won't really be seen. Your stitching won't really be seen if you're really comfortable with it and do it well. So if I kind of pull these apart, you can see that there's bars of stitching, and that's what makes it called the ladder stitch. It looks like rungs of the ladder. So I have stitched my entire crotch area of my monkey's legs, and then all I have to do is just tie a knot. And with the ladder stitch, what you want to do is just do one more little stitch, pretty much going across to the other side, and then having the needle come back through the fabric right where your thread is coming out. So you kind of do just one more little loop. You're going to end up with a loop. You want to make sure you find which side moves less, which in my case is going to be this side here. So I'm going to wrap it around, pull it through, slide all those twists all the way down to the fabric. And then a little trick that I like to do, especially with stuffed things like pillows and stuffed animals, I like to take my needle, I like to put it right through the fabric, right where the knot is, push it through so that I can access the point again, and then pull it all the way through. And when I pull it, I pull a little bit extra, and then I just trim that thread, and that way the end is on the inside of the sock monkey. Now the next thing that we need to do is we do need to make a neck for our monkey, and you're going to do that using the hair tie. And you just want to kind of sit him up, take a look at it, and see where you'd want his head to be. So in my case, I think I'm going to do it right about where this stripe is. That'll give him a nice size head so I can give him his mouth and his eyes, and then he'll still have space for his arms too. So you're just going to take the hair tie, put it around in the spot where you like, and really you just need to do 2 twists, and you're just going to have to kind of smush it into that hair tie for the second time. And then just line them all up. And then again, you can just kind of play around with the shape of the monkey. All right. Like I said, after you sew, you can still play around with the shape of the stuffing. The next part that we're going to need to do is cut our pieces to use for our mouth and our ears. So for the mouth, we're actually going to be using the heel of the second sock. So all I'm going to do is, for mine, I'm just going to kind of cut right between where this white stripe is and the black stripe is, and go pretty much to the middle of the sock. And then on the other side, I'm just going to kind of cut right through the middle of this black sock, or black stripe. You can just cut it until you separate the pieces. And then that is going to end up being my mouth. For my ears, if you want to use a pencil or a pen and just kind of draw out the ear shape, you can do that. But you want to be cutting the ears from the foot side, not the ankle part, the foot part. So I'm going to end up with one white ear and one orange ear. So I'm just going to cut around, The little drawing that I did. If you don't want to draw it and you just want to go for it, by all means do that. And then I'm just going to use this one as my guide for my second ear. All right, don't get rid of any of these pieces because we're going to need to use the rest of this sock to make both your arms and your tail. So you want to make sure that you keep these in a safe spot so that they don't get thrown away. All right, so now I have my 2 ears and I have my mouth part. All right, so with my mouth, what I'm going to do is I want to do some stitching along that heel part to create a little mouth opening, or at least so that it looks like a mouth opening. So I'm just going to take my needle. I'm going to get a little bit longer of a thread because I'm going to do a double thickness thread for this part. And I'm going to start in one corner. And I'm just going to do small stitches all the way across. And you will kind of see that there are some kind of seam parts there that you can utilize as a line. But you're just going to go all the way across, however you want to do it. And you don't want to pull it too much because you want it to try to be keep it as smooth as possible. They don't have to be super small stitches. So my mouth has my little line all the way across. We will attach this later, but what I want to do also is to sew my ears. So what's going to end up happening is I'm going to be stitching around the outsides, and what I'm actually going to do is I am going to do a blanket stitch on this. So we're going to use the same stitch that you did when you originally sewed your legs together. But in this case, what I want to do is actually put the needle just in the middle between the 2 layers so that my knot is on the inside. Because we're not going to be turning these ears right side out. So you're going to have the good side of your ears facing outward, and you're just going to be stitching around the outside. So my knot is on the complete inside. And I'm just going to go around right to where we started. But before I pull that loop all the way through, I'm going to put my needle through that loop to create my first stitch. Now I do have double thickness of my thread on my needle. So the 2 ends of my threads were matched and then tied together. So then I move to the next spot. Okay, I pull through, but before I go all the way through, I put my needle through and then pull this thread through. And I'm going to do that all the way around, and I'm going to do it with both of my ears. Now we're going to attach the nose and mouth to the head. And for this one, I would suggest using some pins. What I would also suggest is just kind of folding, again, that raw edge underneath. And you just want to kind of play around with the placement until you like how it looks. You are going to be stuffing this part, but what I suggest you do is stitch most of it into place and then put a little bit of stuffing into it. It doesn't need or take a lot of stuffing, so it's a lot easier if you get it to be attached in place for the most part, rather than trying to be stitching and holding stuffing in that mouth part. And because of the material that we're using, you won't have any problem with being able to stretch it a little bit to put that stuffing in. So I'm just going to kind of fold those corners over. And then continue tucking those raw edges. And attaching the mouth is going to kind of be a modified ladder stitch, because obviously you don't have two folds, but you do have that one fold, and then you'll just kind of utilize that flat edge like the second fold. So we do want to hide our knot again. I have single thickness, so I just have a knot tied on one end of the thread, and then my other end of my thread is right here. So I'm just going to hide the knot inside. It doesn't really have to be real fancy or perfect, but I just kind of hide it inside, have my needle come up right where the fold is, and then I'm just going to start, as I said, kind of doing a modified ladder stitch. So I'm going along the fold, and then up into the head part. Relatively small stitches, and I'm trying to keep those stitches straight across from each other so they don't really show, because the more angled they are, the more they're going to show. My nose and mouth have been attached. As I was stitching around, when I got to about 3/4 of the way around, I did put just a little bit of stuffing in to give it some shape, okay? And as I said before, it does stretch pretty well to get that stuffing in. My last thing for this part is going to be our ears. And pretty much with attaching the ears, there's not really a specific way to attach it. It's just sort of to make sure that they're attached, and he's not going to stand. He's not going to sit up. Just so that they're attached and that they're not too flappy. So I'm going to use single thickness again. And I'm just going to kind of look at him and figure out where I want it. Want the first ear. And I'm just going to start. And I'll hide that knot as best I can. Actually, what I might do, let's try this. I'm going to stick it through the ear. So I'm just going to kind of stick it through the ear and try to hide that knot inside the ear. I just kind of pull it. And then, like I said, it's just a matter of kind of stitching it in place. What you may want to do is kind of utilize it like that modified ladder stitch going along the fold of the ear and then going into the head. That's probably going to be your best bet. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my second ear, making sure that I am lining it up so that they are in the same place. Those are our steps for part 2 of our sock monkey. Our third and final part will be giving our monkey eyes and also arms and a tail. Once you've completed the steps for part 2, take a picture or a couple of pictures of your monkey and then post them to the Google Classroom assignment and get ready for the final part.